All right, we'll go ahead and get started. This is the ACE track session, Jason and Steve's excellent analytics adventure. Hopefully you are in the right place, and take me down a little bit. Everyone's well caffeinated after the coffee. So for those I haven't met, I'm Jason Mack at JPMorgan Chase. I work in marketing, where I run an analytics team that helps our marketers understand the effectiveness of their campaigns, and we try to give our leaders a holistic understanding of our customer relationships. So I want my analysts to always have the best possible tools that let them solve data problems quickly and enable better decisions. And Steve Hiddle is a leader in our IT organization. He manages the Business Intelligence Center of Excellence. And Steve is not here today. He was originally planning on presenting this session with me, but Steve was selected to participate in a volunteer mission. So he's actually currently en route to northern Guatemala right now, where he's going to spend the next week building a school for rural children. So IT, they're not all bad guys. They do nice things periodically. So it's just going to be me today and telling you about our story. And it's a story about building effective partnerships between the business and IT organizations. Because when Steve and I joined Chase several years ago, we both found this kind of landscape of extremes and incompatible views. Within IT, we had the traditional enterprise approach to business intelligence based on the software development lifecycle model and layers of governance. And our IT groups were accustomed to delivering a few big things pretty infrequently. And that contrasted with analytics in the business, and what almost appeared as sort of an underground. So disappointed by those lengthy IT timelines, the business groups figured they had to get things done on their own with whatever tools they had, even if it was just Excel. And although they were working to solve the same problems as their colleagues in IT, more often than not, it felt like they were working against each other. And so Steve and I thought there has to be a better way. But if we're going to kind of move the culture forward and make things better at JPMorgan Chase, we needed to balance everyone's needs. So IT needs to have the reliable controls and governance models that you need to achieve scale in a massive enterprise. And then the analysts needed to have flexibility and tools to get their jobs done day to day. So transforming that culture and getting to where we are today was quite an adventure, and I'm going to share that story with you today and talk about the issues, technical, cultural, that we had to overcome, and share some of our learnings so that you can apply them in your organizations and realize the benefits of driving an analytics-driven culture. And I'll share the challenges we're still working on today and what we're thinking as we look ahead to the future. So as Steve and I were kind of reflecting on this analytics journey that we've been through the past several years at Chase, we realized that it bore a bit of resemblance to one of our favorite 80s movies, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, starring a young Keanu Reeves. Who remembers this film? Anyone? All right, excellent. So in it, you know that Bill and Ted, they have this phone booth that they have to go back in time and collect this historical cast of characters to finish their high school project, and ultimately, they didn't know it at the time, but save the future of mankind. And we didn't have a phone booth, and I'm not vain enough to believe that enterprise analytics can save the future of mankind. But we certainly, did have to partner and work across a massive organization, bringing together stakeholders, working to advance their thinking, and hopefully at least saving the future of analytics at JPMorgan Chase. So let's go back in time and revisit this analytics adventure. To set the stage, it's useful to understand that JPMorgan Chase essentially operates under two main brands. Chase, which includes the consumer and community banking business, so things like your local retail branches, credit cards, mortgage, auto. And then the JPMorgan brand, which includes the corporate and investment bank and asset management businesses. Now, each of these lines of business has a high degree of autonomy, and to enact change throughout requires a proven record of success. None of them are just going to change the way they do things because you tell them to. You have to prove that there's a better way. And the culture at a bank can be best described as ultra-conservative, given the regulatory environment. So our CEO, Jamie Dimon, is famous for saying that in kind of any regulatory issue, there's 5 or 6 agencies that we have to work with, and sometimes those agencies aren't even clear as to kind of who's responsible and who we have to answer to. So that results in very little risk tolerance and kind of defaulting to historic norms, just the way we've always done it, and a strong preference for good process. When Steve joined Chase, he came into the IT organization to take over an analytics team that was, taking months to complete projects and, not really meeting the business needs. So he wanted to improve what his team was doing. He inherited, an IT status quo that is based on the SDLC process. So who's seen this before, right? We're going to go and get requirements, get a bunch of sign-offs on that, go design something, go get the sign-offs again from people again, build something, test it, get sign-offs again, and maybe 6 months later deploy something into production that probably no longer even meets the needs or the business has moved on. So this kind of waterfall approach only seems to lead downhill, right? So I was recruited into Chase to build an analytics practice for our marketing organization, give them dashboards, and enable better decisions across all those different lines of business, all the marketing channels, and across all of our customer relationships. And when sort of given that task and started digging into it, my reaction was a bit like Ted's here, a bit shocked, figuring out, where am I going to get all of this data to build what I need. I also found, what I refer to as the analytics underground. We had these, business groups that felt neglected by IT, and they had problems and critical questions for which they needed answers, and they needed them today, not in 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months. And then, questions are coming in faster than answers could be deployed through the kind of traditional sanctioned approaches. So how had the business responded? Well, we saw them creating their own, Excel and SAS data marts. They liked that their analysts could come up with their own answers without waiting on IT, but this kind of, build a database under your desk mentality had a significant downside in that there was a complete lack of consistency in results. No two groups could give the same answer to the same question. So we needed a better answer. Steve needed a way to get faster results from his COE team, and although there were internal processes he needed to change, he knew that traditional tools were a major limiting factor for us, and he wanted to test new software to prove that their team could do better results in conjunction with the business partners. And I wanted a better option for my analysts to be able to answer questions faster. I wanted to make it easy for them to get to the data they needed, no matter kind of where it exists, and solve problems without the need for sophisticated programming. So we started looking around, and through the Tableau community, we kept hearing about this tool called Ultrix that seemed to have the promise of being able to connect to any kind of database you want and build things in hours that typically takes weeks or months. So we looked at Alteryx, got a demo, and our reaction was a bit like this. Whoa, right? How many of you kind of felt that way the first time you saw it, first time you got your hands on the tool? Kind of really blows you away with what is possible. So we're super excited about it, about what might be possible. And it's really cool that Ultrix offers a free trial and encourage analysts to download today and get started. But using internet in a large enterprise like Chase kind of feels a bit like this. So I'll go and get my free trial, and cybersecurity policy. Nope, you can't download software. So nobody is going to be forging their own path. From the beginning, we knew we'd have to win the support of others, bringing them into our phone booth, so to speak, if we're going to be successful in bringing Ultrix into the organization. The first person we had to bring into our booth was IT risk. So these are the gatekeepers. And some of their concerns are around, how are we going to ensure, we're going to give this tool to business analysts, how are we going to ensure that their logic is correct? And part of the discussion that we had to have with them and win them over was to make them realize that this is already happening today, whether or not we want to realize it, right? This is happening in Excel, it's happening in SAS. And using this tool will potentially give you more controls than what we're doing today. There were also questions around, who should own it. So we bought a few licenses to get started, and the analysts that wanted this better way were quick to adopt Ultrix. So IT had permitted it. We got it through the IT risk, got all the sign-offs, got it packaged, brought into the organization, and the ones that had the most pain with the data, these individual analysts were quickly embracing it. And we found that there was a strong crossover, that people who were good with Excel and Tableau kind of picked up Ultrix very quickly. At this point, IT as an organization still largely ignored it, right? They permitted it to be brought in, but we're convinced that we've got these other enterprise reporting systems, we've invested millions in them, so it must be working, and didn't really want anything to do with it. So it was growing kind of from the from the analyst base, which led us to start to realize something. If we just give a tool to lots of analysts and let them all go do their own thing, that's starting to bring us somewhere familiar. So in our first year, I was the first licensee of Ultrix at the bank, and I think we're up to 60 by the end of the first year. And if we just kept buying designer licenses and giving them to every analyst who goes their own way, we weren't really going to be any better off than the days of Excel and SAS. Sure, we'd have a better tool, but we haven't kind of solved that the overall problem of working together and ensuring consistent results. So we did need some amount of central coordination. We needed a server environment. The analysts, of course, would have been perfectly happy with Designer alone, but passing around package workflows, data sets, would have only been a marginal improvement over Excel. So, if we needed server, the question was, who's going to run this? Is this going to be something run in the business, run out of IT? Who's going to manage it? Well, at Chase, the business is not allowed to run servers, so we had to engage IT management to get a server environment set up. And their initial reaction was not as positive as we had hoped. So, blow them up, as Napoleon said here when he sees Bill and Ted in the booth. There's something about a piece of software that's fast-growing, flexible, and business-friendly that seemed threatening to a command and control style of IT. But we had to win them over. We had to bring them into our booth. So, how we won them was planning and working through processes that were familiar with them. So instead of fighting them from the beginning, right, working within the frameworks, and then what really helped was focusing on the outcomes we were trying to achieve for our analysts, not the tactical decisions of how it would be set up, configured, managed along the way. So an interesting thing happened as the analysts that used Ultrix, we started to notice that they were actively seeking each other out to ask questions and share learnings, and define best practices as they were working with the tool. And this community was not something we had generally seen before in analytics. So with traditional tools, analysts would tend to actively avoid sharing knowledge because their sort of knowledge of a proprietary programming language they viewed as like their value proposition to the bank. But with something like Alteryx, we found that the analysts had a better understanding that their value is not in kind of holding into a little piece of knowledge, but in fact spreading it and driving the culture forward if you want to become analytics and data driven. And I don't think a lot of people think that working in a bank sounds fun, but for these analytics teams that had Ultrix and were doing this kind of stuff, it really was. So instead of waiting for IT to tell them how they should be using their technology, this community were active participants in their own future. Right? They, as the Ultrix user base grew, they were better prepared to work with IT as Ultrix was adopted more broadly. And we helped to fuel this by getting analysts to share their work on internal lunch and learn type sessions, internal virtual user groups, and departmental meetings that brought together analysts from across different lines of business to show and discuss their work within the tool. It's a lot easier to discuss specifics within an organization. So now we've got IT's full attention. So some additional questions started needing to be answered. So things like, how is this tool going to fit into our existing technology stack? And how are we going to support it with this new development model? And my favorite, why does it cost so much? How many of you get this question? So we needed to win the support of the line of business CIOs who were concerned with questions like those, as well as, how can we onboard and gain efficiencies bringing multiple line of business on at once? So how do we do that? So winning over the CIOs is all about demonstrating value. So we would actively push analysts to share their use cases to continue to build the momentum. And there's a really useful framework for doing this. It's very simple, right? We had them define the problem, describe their ideal outcome, kind of highlight what the particular challenge was. Maybe it's something about the data. Then show how you solved it in Ultrix, including how long it took you. And then talk about the benefits. So there's kind of 5 frameworks. And it doesn't have to be formal. We would give them the structure and ask them to just, after you're done something, write up an email and share it. We do have kind of internal blogging and social media platforms, and you'd use that. But even something as simple as an email, and you start to collect those so that when that pricey subscription comes through the next year, you've built up a library of wins that makes it very easy to demonstrate the value of Ultrix to your CIOs and continue the use. So, we were basically developing a new paradigm in how the business was working with IT. Previously, it sort of felt, the business felt that they were being imposed upon to simply check boxes, like this isn't giving me any value. And in our new approach, right, it's kind of a true partnership where we're defining those problems, setting up a true kind of proof of concept or pilot, right? We'll buy a license, get started, providing the support, mentoring, and training so an analyst can get up to speed quickly, and that builds trust. That keeps the analysts happy and productive. They don't feel like they're just checking boxes. So you know how everything's going great right up until the time it isn't. In the past several years at the bank, things like the formation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the London whale incident at JPMorgan Chase resulted in this major focus on the controls environment. And that impacted all aspects of the bank, not just operational areas or trading areas. It affected analytics. So now there was this new person called a control officer that we found out that we had to win over and bring into our booth. This person is concerned with things like, do you have a well-defined process? And then as I look through that process, where is the risk? And then what controls can be implemented to mitigate that risk? So to address control officers' concerns, we had to align processes across different analytic teams. And one of the things we were able to do is leverage Ultrix in many cases to build automations that reduced a lot of the manual touch points that were still present in analytics processes. And frankly, it was a painful process to go for, and at times it felt as though this intense focus on the controls environment was preventing other work from getting done. But we know we're in much better shape today as a result of going through the process. So what does it look like today? So Ultrix is now in use across nearly all those lines of business that I had on the slide earlier. We're seeing that our analysts are getting to productivity faster, and that's both analysts that are, say, new to a group, new to a department, or existing analysts that are just new to a data source, introducing a new data source because they have Ultrix. But everything is not perfect. Shocking, right? So there's still some challenges that we're working through today. One of those is around enterprise server structures. Things like figuring out what the migration processes should look like between development and testing and production environments, and how we should establish version control. So it's been nice in the past few releases of Ultrix with versioning added on the server. And then also on the server around metadata capture and data lineage. So this is something we've been trying to work with Ultrix to solve, so we were very excited this morning to see with the announcements of the new tools that will kind of fit into this ecosystem and help to solve some of this as well. We also need to kind of monitor our server environments better, right, to understand things like data connection optimization and performance. So in version 11, if any of you notice, there's data connections that basically can be moved up to the server, and then you can connect through Designer to an established data connection on the server. So that's great because we can build very good connectors there and ensure people are getting to the data in the right way. And then as far as monitoring, it's balancing kind of the use of Ultrix server as a scheduled kind of data factory versus the on-demand usage that you would get out of exposing gallery. So how do you need to size it appropriately depending on how you're using it? And then finally, new version cadence. New versions of Ultrix come out a lot faster than we can keep up with. We have kind of a very defined process we have to go through with security scanning and getting things packaged and certified and signed off. So I still have 10.6 on this laptop now. We just got 11 packaged, so I'll be pushing that out to my users next week or so. So balancing sort of like all those great features that Ultrix is bringing in, those capabilities, versus the sort of processes that we have to go through internally, and making sure our users feel like they're getting the benefits of the new versions that are coming through their subscription. So this is what how my team operates today. We have kind of a sampling. This is a small number. There's actually many more than that, but I felt that was pretty representative of data sources at the bottom there. Everything from Excel files, traditional data warehousing technologies like Teradata, all the way to modern big data such as Hadoop and modern MPP data platforms like Greenplum. We use Ultrix to bring all of that stuff together to do our advanced analytics and data prep and pipe that both to Tableau Desktop for Tableau Desktop users and as kind of published data sources to Tableau Server, where my team builds. We have about 6 dashboards supporting about 6,000 business users. So Ultrix is kind of core to what we do, even though kind of Tableau dashboards tend to be the most front-facing thing that the business sees. So what's next for us as we look ahead? So we're looking to continue to build out this notion of self-service at scale. And to do that, we're looking to expand governance. So things like published and certified workflows that are available for reliable data sources. Giving our analysts guardrails so they can have repeatable success. So again, some of the announcements from this morning's keynote fit right into this. So very excited to see those new features starting to be built in. We want to continue to make sure that analysts that pick up the tool we can accelerate their onboarding. So we're looking to kind of curate templates, workbook templates, and pre-configured data sources. So once an analyst gets Ultrix on their desktop, they're good to go from day one. One of the things that we do through that packaging process I mentioned is we can do a lot of customization. So instead of just installing Ultrix, I can ensure that certain data configurations and all go along with that package when it gets pushed down to the users from IT. So we're trying to spend a lot of time there to make sure that the kind of package that they get has everything they need and they don't have to spend a lot of time setting up data sources and kind of getting Ultrix plugged into all the things that they need. And then we're also trying to make sure that Alteryx integrates well with existing processes to avoid that perceived kind of rebuild cost and people sort of avoiding improving things because of not wanting to have to redo code or things like that. I think the amusing thing is with that is almost every time that you've kind of cracked open old code and done something with Alteryx, not only can you improve it, but we actually find errors in the old one that no one sort of realized was there. And then we kind of quickly want to get to the new one and put the old one away without dwelling too long on that. We're also working through the challenges of what we call like the big data evolution. So large enterprises like mine are migrating a lot of their data, if not almost all of it, out of traditional data warehouses into various flavors of Hadoop for a variety of reasons, performance, cost, and data's always been big for a bank, whether it was in the traditional ones or in Hadoop. I mean, with a company that does 14 billion credit card transactions a year. But now this new platform presents kind of new opportunities for us. And one of the things I'm excited about, having Ultrix through this transition, has been a major advantage for my team. So things like having the in-database tools for Hive and Impala connectors has really given our analysts the best of both worlds. So they're able to leverage kind of the easy-to-use Ultrix interface, but then also have the power of a large several hundred node cluster to process the data when they build workflows using the Hive, Spark, and Impala in database tools. And finally, the data security involved with that big data elements, still needing to set up and maintain access roles and monitoring for private data and limiting data movement. So there's 3 key lessons that I hope you can take away for your analytics adventure. The first is partnering early with your IT and business stakeholders because you're not going to get far alone. Second is promoting a community because you can really scale analytics once it goes social. And finally, don't be afraid to ask why. Always challenging assumptions and pushing to improve in the right way. So Ultrix has been an amazing adventure for us, and I hope our story is helpful in making your analytics journey most excellent. Questions?
How come IT was not involved until later in the point if they're connecting to Hadoop and these databases, which I think IT owns?
So to clarify, the question was around, why wasn't IT involved? So IT definitely was involved from the beginning. We had to get their permission to bring it in. So we got permission, got it packaged, and started using it. But they didn't, when I say they weren't involved from a kind of supporting Ultrix as a service standpoint, like running a server and engaging it that way. They definitely were involved from the beginning, right? And sanctioning the connections to all the environments and all.
What percentage of publishing content onto the server is done by IT versus business?
So in ours, we have kind of a model where business users can publish to development environments and to these kind of, one of the things we do is create these special environments that are sanctioned for production data, but business users can publish to. And then we have traditional, quote, production environments, right, where business users will after completing their testing, submit a ticket, and then IT migrates it there for them. So we kind of have a model where they can do all of those. Yep, exactly. And so that was kind of key to it, is like adapting, instead of saying like, no, we're going to do this a different way, is like taking a tool that's going to make it better and adapting it to the current process and then pushing to improve kind of where you can. Like I mentioned, there's kind of build environments where we're allowed to touch production data there. So. Oh, it's much faster, right? Yeah, exactly. It's a heck of a lot faster.
Did you have any IT departments try to get you to use different tools or anything?
So we look at a lot of different tools. So if you can name any data prep tool, like up to buying Ultrix, I probably tested it. I think one of the things that we liked about Ultrix is very much, like we had been using Tableau prior to that. And because they have sort of this designer and server model, I presented it as a very low-risk option, right? With some of the other ones where it has to sit in your data center, it's a big project from the start. And with this, I said, well, let's just buy a few licenses, try it, and if we don't like it, we just won't renew a year later. And that seemed very reasonable to them. We tried it, and then we went down that process of building and documenting those use cases, so we kept buying more, and then said, all right, now we need a server environment, and grew it that way. I think they would like to be able to push stuff to production, but that's just one of those things that's not really negotiable currently. We're pressing and getting closer and closer to that. And I think if we can build sort of automations within Ultrix that do the checks, things like that, we reduce their manual touch points. But it's just one of those things that you're never going to overcome.
Okay,
So.
But they do adapt.
What's that?
They adapt to this process.
Exactly. Do you want to give people the mic, or am I repeating questions? We good.
What do you check for when you promote from test to production? You didn't build the work for IT.
No, and IT does. So the business is doing those checks themselves, right? The business owns responsibility for the data and the calculations and everything that they're building. IT is really like migrating the information to make sure that they're meeting their audit requirements. Separation of controls, exactly. Yep, exactly. Purely compliance.
Are you guys using the concept of service accounts to connect to databases?
Yep, we do. And Ultrix, and that's what I mentioned, sort of the building data connectors up to the server. So most teams, like if you have a team, you will use kind of a service account and get that set up with access to the database, and then you'll set that up within Ultrix. It used to be called alias data sources, and now it's called like, managed data sources when they moved it to server in 11. But that's something that I mentioned kind of like that we package up and make sure our users have so that everyone on my team gets kind of the pre-configured data sources with those functional IDs that they need for the different environments.
But isn't it possible that different business users connecting to the same source and have different?
Yep, and those departments would have their own IDs. Sure. Back there.
What do you guys use to share best practices across your organization? Do you have like a center of excellence or a wiki or something along those lines?
A lot of different things. So we do have, like Steve runs the center of excellence. We have an internal platform. We call it kind of our internal social media platform. It's like a forums type of thing, and those are aligned to interests. So we have an analytics one where people can both either ask questions, post comments, things like that, and you flag them as such. So if someone posts and tags an Ultrix question, it comes into my inbox so I can answer it. Things like that. We do lunch and learn kind of sessions where we'll have people demonstrate things that they've done, and then we also just as simple as creating like SharePoint pages, things like that. Where we outline like here's how to do things. A lot of the Ultrix trainings I host internally off of platforms like that. As much as because we're so distributed. JPMorgan Chase's 250,000 employees all over the world. Doing stuff, in person can be difficult, so we do a lot of virtual user group meetings. So we'll kind of get together on like a WebEx with cameras and everything, and talk about either specific topics or just bring like a doctor session kind of thing, like come with your problem, see how to help. So we do a lot of different things to achieve that.
Hi, in our bank. I feel like we're 5 years behind where you are, almost exactly, but I feel like a lot of the data analytics people that we work with are very tethered to the idea that the only thing that they can use comfortably is Excel. How did you change that culture? Could you describe more deeply how you kind of change people's minds about adopting new tools?
Yeah, so my group, it's probably going to be different for each one. So my group were already like Tableau users. That's how we found Ultrix, was through that community. So they had sort of already evolved beyond Excel. But I certainly do a lot of demos and show Ultrix to like finance groups, things like that are very heavy in Excel. And I think it's just really a matter of demonstrating like the speed with which you can get things done, and then just the hard limits. Like anyone who's done stuff in Excel, they know not just like the row limits, like how difficult and clunky it can be to get things done. So kind of like just showing them the benefits of like a better way of doing it helps a lot. But our team, it was an easier sell because we had sort of bumped up against the limits of Tableau and needed the tool to kind of make the data better. So it was a lot easier.
And server cores, did you face any problems from procurement in understanding how this fit into the tool set?
No, not really. So the way it works internally for us, once we've sort of approved the vendor and the specific version of the software and everything, it gets kind of loaded up to an internal catalog, and anyone can go and buy it as long as their department financially signs off for it. Until you, at our scale, until you reach like tens of millions of dollars to spend, procurement and all doesn't bother to care kind of what each line of business is doing, because again, they each have their own P&L. So if once it's approved and if they want to buy it and they can justify it to themselves, they can get it. So, questions on that side?
So as you start looking at big data, are you saying that your Hadoop cluster is a source or a destination for Alteryx workflows?
It's a source, for sure. So we use Hadoop for a lot of things. So a lot of our, like, say, web data is the obvious use case there. Chase's website is probably, I think, I've heard, among like the top 50 in the world for traffic. It's definitely the #1 banking portal. So we get trillions of records every week into Hadoop environment. And then I can use Ultrix. I expose that data through Hive tables. And then I use Ultrix in database tools because I don't want to move all that data. It would take forever. It probably would never work. I can't copy that into my laptop. So you expose that through Hive tables and use the in-database blending to kind of get the stuff down to the, from trillions of records to the 10,000 records I really need to build like the Tableau dashboards that's going to explain like how well, the particular ads were performing on the homepage or things like that.
So you're doing push downs to the cluster?
No, so we're usually, like, Hadoop would be one of our sources, and then we're publishing stuff up to Tableau server, because my team, again, like the most external thing we do is dashboards, right, is that we give our leaders and all. So we're not pushing analytics sets back to the cluster, we're pushing them up to Tableau server from there as one of the sources.
So you mentioned the in-database processing, right? But if you do think about that in the Hadoop world, that's pushing down your in-database processing to the cluster. You guys are doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, both Hive and Impala. So we use Cloudera. My group uses Cloudera. We have like a 250 node cluster. So.
You talked a lot about empowering like your analysts, right? Have you has that proliferated at all to other people in the company, or like the common man or citizen analyst as well?
So analysts exist within kind of every one of those lines of business, and even kind of within like particular product teams and things like that. They will tend to find us when they've hit the limits of their current processes. So I haven't, in kind of the past 3 years or so that we've been using Ultrix, I haven't had to sort of actively sell it to any group. They've all, once it's in, they hear about it through Tableau, they see stuff we do with our internal community, and they say, hey, can you show us what it can do for it? And then, then they'll make the decision within their group if they want to wind up adopting it. So we do give it to a lot of those analysts we sit at the corporate level in marketing, but they, a lot of the ones in the lines of business have picked it up as well, just depending on what their needs are.
And do you guys have anyone dedicated to community or culture, like dedicated team?
Around Ultrix?
And just in general, analytics, self-service analytics?
Around Ultrix community, it's probably me. But no, it just, I think with the analytics community stuff, just there's individuals in each group that like care about their data geeks, love doing this stuff, right, and just sort of self-select into participating in a lot of this. So it's not anyone's job to say, here, go promote a culture of analytics. So it's happened naturally.
Thanks.
How many years have you guys been using Alteryx?
3 years. I think I bought the first license in very early 2015, early 2014, something like that.
You talked about the downsides to the waterfall approach, how it can take a while. The BRDs and testing are a lot of fun. So have your analysts, when you guys deploy build a workflow and then deploy it, are you guys using that same approach? What are you guys doing?
No, it's more of we take more of call it an agile. We don't do scrums and things like that. But, because a lot of what my group gets called into is to hard problems other groups can't solve, or new data sources, things like that. So we take an approach of let's get our hands on the data, try to figure stuff out, fail fast sort of thing. If we say no, this is not going to give us what we need, what we're trying to solve. So I'd say it's more of an agile methodology, but not officially.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
How big is your Ultrix cluster in terms of the server and enterprise environment? Is it 2 node, 3 node, or?
So we have multiple server environments. For my groups, mine is a relatively small cluster. It's just a 2 node, 8 core kind of setup, but there are multiples. Each department that has adopted it has wound up getting their IT groups to support their server environments as well. So we have several, but that one's mine. But.
You talked about certified workflows. So have you?
That's something we're trying to figure out. That's on the future, the challenges we're working through,
That's
right?
what we're working through. So I think even Gartner talks about it, right? So if you are doing something every week, every month, and it's a mature workflow, it's not changing, then you want to promote that into your regular SDLC IT fold and maybe use Informatica to do that, right? Is that what
and
you guys are
yes,
thinking?
we definitely do that. So we use Ultrix as kind of a rapid prototyping tool for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Instead of just going to IT with a vague, hey, we need this to be done, and waiting through that process, we'll go in, we'll figure it out, we'll build an Ultrix flow and say, okay, this is going to take the data that we're, say, buying from a vendor or getting out of some other process into the format that we need where it's analytics ready. We've been running it for a month or 2 now. We're confident in it. Here is a very solid set of requirements that you can pick up and Control M, Informatica, whatever the enterprise class true ETL tools are. give that to them and let them do that process there. So we definitely use Ultrix as a rapid prototyping tool to help IT, right? I mean, they're happy about that as well because we're not giving them sort of half-baked ideas that wind up failing and everyone's, unhappy with each other. We know exactly what we want. I mean, that's the fundamental challenge with analytics and IT, right, is like IT wants, tell me exactly what you need and I'll go build it, but in analytics, it's like this whole journey and adventure. I don't know where I'm going to go or end up, right, when I get started, because as I get in and explore the data, I might take different tracks. So. Are we out of time or good?
Just a few more minutes. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jason Mack.
Sure. Thank you.